My challenge is the name of my talk, so the economic parity challenge, or some reasons for skepticism. All right, so the idea here is I think you can think of two different reasons why we want to do uploads. One is that we want to continuation of personal identity, so we call it the vanity project, someone wants to live forever, be immortal. The second economic motivation is that these are going to be workers. Let's call that the Hansonian motivation. I think in the end the Hansonian motivation must dominate and that they must be competitive. So I'm going to consider that like an economic constraint on whole brain emulation. And you can think of the economic constraint is that the cost, the total cost, must be lesser than or equal to AGI cost. And so there's like maybe three components to whole brain emulation. Scan cost, I'm not even going to talk about that. It's on my area of expertise. There's some people here that know more about that. I'm going to assume that's actually zero. Then there's the imaging cost, which is that given that you have the high resolution voxel data, how do you convert that into image processing into connectivity data? And then finally, there's the run cost. The run cost you can consider it's just you can convert all these into just do an interest rate, convert these into a yearly cost if you want. But I'm going to assume here that the whole brain emulation cost is beyond parity with it. The WBE run cost beyond parity with the AGI run cost. I think that's reasonable because it seems very unlikely that whole brain emulation technology would be more efficient than AGI that uses the same principles because you're adding some additional constraint in fidelity. All right, so really that reduces then to scan cost plus imaging cost less than training cost. And I'm just going to actually focus on imaging cost less than training cost for the most part. All right, brain imaging, around 1e to the 21 voxels. That's a lot of voxels at 10 nanometer resolution. You can maybe it's 20 nanometer resolution, even just as the 1e to 20th or whatever. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Compared to human lifetime visual data, which is around 1e to 17th pixels. And so we need to use roughly around 10,000 times less computation the human visual cortex uses to process each image. Or, to compare it in a different way, Resident 50 uses around 1e to the 5th flops per pixel. So that would equate to around 1e to the 26 flops if you're using ResNet 50 to scan your voxel images converted to 2D. And that's going to be really $100 million if you're using current H100s. If you were using the cheapest possible GPU that could possibly work, like an RTX 490, it would be reduced down to 10 million. But that's sort of a rough bound. This is probably in excess of GPT-4 training, but not dramatically so, maybe one order of magnitude. That's just the imaging cost. All right, AGI training cost. GPT-4 is not necessarily the limit. AGI might be more or less than that. The brain uses roughly 1e to the 9th, 1e to 10 spikes in the cortex. The cortex is at least 50% of the spikes. The computational complexity, Lenny cost cortical computations were the source of this. That actually maps to only 1e to the 14 sparse flops per second or less, and total training of 1e to 23rd sparse ops for total training cost for a 32-year lifetime, which is 1e to the 9 seconds, conveniently, or worst case, 1e to 26 GPU flops if we really were totally memory bandwidth bound and doing everything very efficiently. But this is very doable, and that's actually the same number as before. Notice the storage is not especially constraining, even if you had to use 100 terabytes of storage. It just maps to 1,000 GPUs, roughly, give or take. And that's already sort of assumed that we want to train the thing less than 3 years of actual runtime. So we're getting a number that's actually very similar to the imaging cost, just for the AGI training cost, assuming that you're using brain scale ANNs as your best implementation method of AGI. All right. This is actually sort of a contra to an earlier slide on communication costs as being a bottleneck. They probably are not. 1e to 10 spikes per second is at most 1e to 14th bits per second. That's using the very simplistic assumption that every individual spike across the synapse has to be communicated across the GPU boundaries. You can do a quick estimation of the total. Okay, let's say that. Quick estimation of the total number of long distance axons by looking at the volume of those axons based on their diameter and their length, assuming they run across the entire length of the brain. And you do some math, and you get a constraint that there's at most around 10 billion long-range connections. That's just not that many, and running that at 1 hertz or less via Lenny is a very reasonable amount of interconnect bandwidth that could actually run on standard Ethernet. It's just not a lot of data. You scale that up to run it on 1,000 GPUs, you could in theory run it 1,000 times faster than real time. Ethernet is sufficient, most likely. All right. So, pure WBE, whole brain emulation, is unlikely to be cost competitive unless we can fully scan image brains for less than $10 million or less than AGI training cost. Moore's law doesn't really help because Moore's law decreases the cost of AGI training and imaging, but it does not decrease the cost of scanning. So I'm assuming here the scanning doesn't cost anything, but in reality, Moore's law just makes this worse, right? So the conclusion I draw from this is that hybrid approaches are more likely. We need to find ways to scan brains without actually scanning brains fully. We need to find ways to scan them sparsely, in piecemeal, combine it with other resolution data. So looking at it that way, the challenge is, why has brain scanning not yet proven useful for AI? And at what point will that stop being true and transition to scanning data being actually useful and competitive for AGI training? Yeah, so I want to do some time for questions. So that's the end. There we go.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. One, can you not replicate, once you scan an image, that's a fixed cost and you can then run as many versions of that as you want?
Yes, but same for AGI training.
Yes, okay. So, and then my second question is, does this requires that the actual performance is comparable? Like, if AGIs are substantially better, it doesn't necessarily matter that they can be more costly, but if it's 10 times as small, you will still want to use
Correct.
it.
I was assuming that that's right. Like in reality, I don't expect it to stop at $10 million. If someone's training AGI for $10 million, then someone else is training for $100 million to make more powerful AGI, right? So that doesn't really help the whole brain emulation very much. Yes. There we go.
Are you assuming costs for destroying humanity?
Say again?
That's a negative externality, it's not all.
Right. Economy doesn't care. Yeah. Go ahead.
So economically, you could also model it as simply the people that are alive right now have the money right now, and they don't want to die, and so simply because of that, they're willing to pay money to not die, and the rest of it doesn't factor into it.
I
They're not
agree.
willing to pay money to train a random.
Yeah, I mean, the starting assumption here was that it was just pure economic competitiveness, like the Hansonian assumption, which I think is bleak. And so I agree with that. I think the hope is that wealthy people want to fund whole brain emulation, and then that scales up to reducing the cost so that everyone can be uploaded, or not everyone, a large number of people be uploaded, and we pay the price. But it still is the case that the steeper that price is, the harder that is to it, right? The more risk there is. So I think it is imperative to reduce the cost.
Give me your... Oh, Anders, my question.
If you see brain emulation as a way of getting to AI value alignment, then you might say we might want to do a few very costly uploads because that is actually worth it for getting the safe AI. And even though the AGI is going to then hopefully do all the work and haven't learned the laziness from the scam people or something like that.
Fully agree. Yes.
Okay, awesome. I won't let you go before you tell me a challenge.
Oh, it was. It was just right and tough. It was right at the beginning. The economic parity challenge.
The economic parity challenge. Let's leave it at that.